What's going on, comrades? So, a few weeks ago, I had the premiere of my play, 3,000 Days of Abandonment, and I thought I was going to jump into this content game like heavy afterwards, but I actually just disappeared for the last 3 weeks. I was actually pretty depressed. I'm like fucking miserable. And within those 3 weeks, I learned a powerful concept called personal mythology, and it actually changed my whole approach to storytelling. And I kind of want to get into it a little bit, so let's check it out. So, right, 3,000 Days of Abandonment. It was a play that I wrote this year, and it was loosely based on my own childhood. It follows a young boy named Jose Uribe and what he and his family go through after his mother is incarcerated and later deported after 9 years. It's a story of connection. It's a story of being honest, and it's a story of vulnerability. And goddamn, was I vulnerable the whole time. I wrote it for a contest, and the first prize winner of the contest was going to get their play staged. I'd never written a play, but I had this story that I've been wanting to tell for a long time. I kind of just wrote the story from a place of fear and scarcity, because I was like, all right, I gotta just get this done. I gotta submit it. And to my surprise, I won. And next thing you know, I'm going through the rehearsals and seeing the actors put this together. And the whole thing was just so overwhelming that I almost didn't believe it was still going to happen up until opening night. And then when I saw all those people there sitting ready to see it, I'm telling you, my head was just exploding. My heart was melting. But it went amazing, you know? And I knew I was very lucky to be in this position. But afterwards, I started realizing, I know the story was good, and I know I was lucky, but could I have done better? Let's take the story, let's take it to another theater. Bro, let's get to Broadway, baby. Just like, yo, what's next? Come on. What's the shiny new object that I crashed? I didn't realize how much of a personal story that was, and how revealing it got a weight off, but it put something else on. It put this burden of, bro, you just revealed yourself. And that's not easy. So once 2 weeks passed, I knew that I had to do something. And I did this counterintuitive thing where I decided I wanted to be a student again. I wanted to just learn something, you know, not just jump on YouTube, but to actually learn something, have homework, and to work on something that's not as big. So I took 2 different courses. I took a songwriting course with Jen Wasner from Flock of Dimes, who is an amazing musician, by the way. I just jumped at that chance when I saw that ad on Instagram. So that's pretty cool. And I also took a Stories with Impact course by a playwright named Christine Cato. She wrote this wonderful play called Sancocho. I haven't seen it, but I read a lot about it, and the similarities between the family stories of her play and my play, I was like, I think I can learn something from here. And I mean, the Stories with Impact course and the course notes, I mean, as you can just see, it rang true to everything I wanted to do with 3,000 days that I kind of subconsciously did, but I didn't do with intention. So I wanted to learn a bit more about what this class was about, so I jumped at it. So what I learned from the first class of the Stories with Impact is that being a writer actually sort of means revisiting your childhood, right? It means going back to who you are and trying to rediscover that. And the best way you can kind of do that is to go to your origin story and recreate your myth, or at the very least start to understand what myths you created when you were young. We had this writing exercise that we had to do. It was to dig into our personal myths and to look at the personal stories that you were told from your family. What are the recurring images that come up, the rhythms, the conflicts? What are the places that made you, old family sayings, objects you keep, And what are myths that were put onto you, and what are the contradictions of those myths and the myths that you created? What was cool was we also had to bring a personal object that meant a lot to us. And this personal object had to coincide with the moment that we realized that we wanted to become writers. A lot of people brought photos, trinkets, bracelets, but this was mine, right? This was my mother in prison and me holding on and clutching on, smiling. And, you know, I've shown this picture a lot of times, but I've never really shown the letter or the note. And I don't remember this, right? I just kind of found this photo this year, right before I wrote the play. And it affected me so much that I knew I wanted to write about it, and it just coincided with the playwriting competition that I got in my email. But the synchronicity of telling that story, of finding this course, I'm like, oh my God, I did tell a myth, right? Or I dug into a family myth, that of my mom's imprisonment, that all the family knows, all the family has a relationship with this. But I had my own version. And it was interesting because I was doing the free write and I wrote about that. Like, we had like 15 minutes, and believe me, if you just sit there and you start going 15, 20 minutes writing, some shit's gonna come out. And one of the things that came out was that everybody has these great stories of my mom, right? They have these wonderful stories of when they were kids, of when they were in their early 20s and growing up. But my story with my mom is completely different, right? It's one of prison, it's one of pain, it's one of loss. And I incorporated that subconsciously in my play. And I believe that's why it did resonate, because it was my truth, right? It was my personal myth that I was out there telling. Another thing was that I had a lot of these reoccurring images in all the work that I do, in my poetry, in my journal, in the paintings that I hang up and stuff. A lot of the things that make me me. I'd like to read the first 2 pages of the free write, if you don't mind. One of the myths I've chosen for myself is that of the Wanderer. It's in the music of Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan, and Tom Waits. It's in film noir stories of Bogart and Chandler. It's of top hats, guitars, and motorcycles, of Ginsberg and Burroughs beat poetry and 3 cats lounging around, of martial arts or a boxer who fights one-on-one and refuses the team struggle, of revolutionaries, of philosophers, novelists, bluesmen, and clowns. It is that of the loner, the outcast, the Ronin, a banjo player by the river singing songs of loneliness, a man of synthesis playing dark music on an electronic sonic machine after midnight. My family tells me that I was always a quiet kid. I remember being in chaos, of striking myself, of starving for pity and for attention. I know, let me not even go on, bro. It's crazy. But I had this realization that, you know, I'm attracted to all these things of loneliness, all these things of a dark hero, of the poet of the outcasts, you know, and a lot of that was tied to my own abandonment issues. And it was a part of my personal mythology. I think it's very important that if you can figure out what those images are, if you can figure out what those motifs are, you could put pen to paper and write from that. And what Miss Akato was saying in the Stories with Impact courses, when you take those motifs and you put it in a story, what those motifs become is tone. It becomes the subtext of the story. It becomes what you say without saying it. And I thought that was very interesting. And so I would actually challenge you to try this exercise and try to look at it in a way that you are decolonizing your mind from the stories that you were told, right? And you're looking for almost like a war of independence to name what those personal motifs, what that tone of your life is, so that you can have the power to speak from it. Because I can already tell you, for me, it's the wanderer archetype, right? It's Tom Waits, it's Bob Dylan, it's Woody Guthrie, it's the poet. I mean, that's a big part of play. The young man Jose, he eventually liberates himself by listening to Tupac and writing poetry, right? And speaking truth when his other family members kind of want to keep everything contained with small lies and things like that. From that writing too, I found bits of a new story that I want to try out. It was about my grandfather, because when we were writing about our family myths, I wrote about my grandfather, who is this larger than life character. He had the gold chains, he had the new TVs, the new cars. He had this big Cadillac Escalade that I remember was just this grand gesture. Eventually, they went off to Florida. He's not in a good state, man. He's got the Parkinson's. But they left me the Cadillac, or like I kind of inherited the Cadillac, and it was in its last days. I mean, this thing was broken. Tires were bad. There was a clock, like a very fancy clock in the console. That clock never worked. Like it almost symbolized not only my grandfather's decay, but my disconnection from the stories of that, because I didn't own a new Cadillac. I owned a broken Cadillac. So broken that eventually got broken into, just tore up. I just left it out in the parking lot with a lot of tickets. Cops towed it, and that was that. It was interesting finding that story while writing about the mythology of my family, which is another reason why you should kind of sit down and write, because you don't know what will come up and could be content or the next idea for your next story. Again, and from the course, she talked about decolonizing your mind from your family truths. And it was cool, right? Because you have the family mythology, but you have your individual truth. And she had asked us to circle the phrases that were our individual truth that ran contrary to what the family myth that they imposed upon us was. And that right there, the circling of that's conflict. That's drama, right? That's something you want to pay attention to. So that's another note for you right there. Gems. Oh yeah. And so understanding your personal mythology, it gives you a compass to work with creatively. It gives you a way where you can craft your North Star and see exactly from what voice you're writing from. Because I think that's the hardest part, right? Of being unsure of where to write from in the sense of our style, our voice, for what makes us authentic. So I think this is a good exercise to really bring that out and to work on the discovery. Looking back on 3,000 Days of Abandonment, I mean, the word abandonment is literally center, right? It was what I feared the most. And I can see how the whole story was built on personal mythology of this quiet observer dealing with inherited family trauma, just like the broken Cadillac. And no wonder it worked with audiences. And like the mythology was there for everybody to then grab on, pull back and say, oh, my mythology is here. One of my judo mates, he was there and he's like, bro, I was raised by my grandma and that scene hit me. Another friend was like, oh my God, that fight with the sister, that was me and my sister. And another guy was like, bro, I was incarcerated and this really hit me. He was like, you are not charging enough for this. I'm like, I had no control over the tickets and all that. But, if you're a writer or a creator that's struggling with like finding your authentic voice, start with these questions, man. Like, what images keep showing up in your work? what are the films, the artists that you look up to, and what about them draws you to them? What stories did your family tell about you, and in which ways do you feel like they are not right at all? Circle them. So from that, I have this homework assignment to write a monologue, and when writing this monologue, try to keep a tone with the subtext of the personal mythology, right? And so I think I'm going to do something of a wanderer. Again, right? This is still kind of all new to me, so bear with me. I'm being very fucking vulnerable here. But this is just the beginning. Next week, I'll show you some stuff from the songwriting course that I also have homework from, and which is also amazing. Because it just sort of switches your brain off to a creative side. And again, I'll save that for a different video. So follow me if you want to learn more about that and kind of see where this journey takes me. And, if you got an idea of some personal mythology that you already have, let me know in the comments. I kind of want to see what some stories are out there and why they follow certain people. Wow, I got my fucking hands folded like this. Fucking crazy. All right, later, comrades. Mama, I love you.